I'm going to start off by just sharing my testimony of how I came to know the Lord. We were brought up in quite a very strict Sikh family. My parents weren't practicing as in going to the temple regularly, but only on special occasions, weddings and things like that. So we had quite a sheltered upbringing, to the degree that even when we were at school we weren't allowed to go to any of our friends' homes. You came straight home and that's how it was. If you went shopping, somebody from the family went with you. And we didn't like it, but it was the way it was, and you know, we adhered to it. So as time went on, my brother and his wife Balbir and Kirpal had come to know the Lord and had given their lives to the Lord, and they used to often witness to me and my sisters, and I used to think, oh, here we go again, you know. I used to think, this is all they talk about is Jesus and God, you know. Does it really matter who you worship, you know? Surely all paths lead to the same way. And as the years went on, they got very, very involved in the church, and there was difficulties when they first became Christians, but maybe sometime they'll be able to share that with you. But for me, it was my sister-in-law's birthday, and she'd invited me to go to a full gospel businessman's fellowship international dinner, and that was in Gravesend in Kent. And she'd said to me it was her birthday, and because Mum and Dad were really strict with us, we weren't allowed to go out much. So for me, it was like the highlight of my year. I was getting out. And I was at college at the time, and I remember going to college and saying to all my friends, I'm going to a restaurant for a meal. And they were looking at me like, well, what's the big deal? You know, but to me it was. I was going out in the evening, and that didn't happen unless we were visiting relatives or, you know, people that we associated with. So near the time, my sister-in-law said to me, she said, Kalbinder, there's going to be a lot of Christians there, and somebody's going to share their testimony about what Jesus has done in their life and what their life was like before they became a Christian. And I said, oh, I'm not bothered about that. They can share what they like. I'm only going for the 3-course meal, you know, and that was my intention. You know, sometimes we have plans in our own hearts and we go with, you know, something in mind, and God has something else in mind. So, you know, near the time I was really excited because, you know, it was like the highlight of my year. I was going out in the evening and to a restaurant, and I'd gone along, and we sat there and we had the meal, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as we sat there, this man started sharing his testimony of what his life was like before he accepted the Lord Jesus Christ. And I kind of sat there and listened, and he got to the end of his testimony. He said, I've told you what Jesus has done in my life. He goes, but I want to tell you that the Lord can change your life. And I thought, okay. So as he sort of carried on, he said, I'm going to pray a prayer. If you want to pray it, you can. So I sat there, and I used to really take the mickey out of my sister. You know, we used to share a bedroom together, and I used to, you know, she wanted to read a Bible. I used to say, I want to turn the light off, and, you know, so you and your Christianity. And I used to really sort of mock them about their faith. And that night, as we sat there, and he prayed, he prayed the prayer, and quietly in my mind, I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. It's not going to cost me anything. I prayed this prayer in my mind. And after praying the prayer, I thought, oh, that's it, I'm a Christian. Well, I don't feel any different, you know. And then he said, if you said the prayer, can you put your hand up? Well, at that point, I remember opening my eyes and looking at everybody in that restaurant that night. And there must have been about 50 to 60 people there. And I thought, forget it. I thought, there's no way I'm going to put my hand up and make myself look like a fool. And the second time he said it, the only way I can explain what happened to me, it was like somebody stood behind me and lifted my hand up. And I felt such a peace inside me, and I just burst out into tears. And in my head I was thinking, you idiot, what are you doing? But in my heart I knew that something had happened. I didn't fully understand, but I knew that by praying that prayer, it was like Somebody had cleaned me up on the inside. You know, and that was back in 1982, you know, and when I look back and I see the things that God has done, you know, how God has moved in our family, you know, so many of our family and relatives have come to know the Lord, some are in ministry, some are ministers, you know, it's incredible to see how God can take an individual and change people's lives, you know, and as time's gone on, you know, when I became a Christian, I remember we started to go to church, and I started to say to the Lord, I said, I want to see what this Bible says. I said, if I don't see it, then you are not true to your word. And I used to challenge God, you know, and I'd say to the Lord, I say, right, if your word says when we lay hands on the sick, they'll recover, I want to see it. If you say, you know, that if we seek you for the gifts, I want to seek you for them. I want to see things happen. I don't just want to be one of these Christians that sit in church, that have got born again, baptized in water, baptized in the Holy Spirit, and then they fold their arms and become comfortable. You know, and that was my desire for God, you know. After becoming a Christian, I used to always say, Lord, show me what you want me to do. And I'd gone away on a conference one year, and a Christian conference down at Minehead, the Assemblies of God. And I'd gone away and I'd been saying to the Lord, I said, Lord, I really need you to speak to me. I really want you to show me what your will is for my life. And as time went on, that week progressed. I was sharing accommodation with some friends. And a dear Christian lady friend of mine called Jean, who's gone to be with the Lord last year, was a real spiritual mentor for me. She used to hear from the Lord like I'm talking to you now. And I used to watch this woman and I used to think, I want to hear from God like she does. I used to think, Lord, if she can hear from you, I want to hear like that. Teach me, you know. And I remember at that Christian conference one morning we were sitting at breakfast and she looked at me and she said, Kalbinder, I've been praying for you. And God spoke to me about you, and I thought, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. Come on, I want to hear what you said. And she said, the Lord's told me to tell you he wants you to go to Bible college. Well, my spoon went back in my bowl of cornflakes, and I kind of sat there thinking, well, he hasn't told me, and I'm not going. I've got no desire to go. Why would I want to go to Bible college? I'd never even thought about Bible college. You know, it never even crossed my mind. I used to always think, I'll give up my job and go and do a year's evangelism with Youth with a Mission or something like that. My heart's desire was always evangelism. And I used to think, no, she's got it wrong. Anyway, I came back to the church, and after coming back to the church, every time I saw her in church, she'd say, Kalbinder, I'm praying for you. And I used to think, why doesn't this woman leave me alone? She said, you will go. When God speaks to me, I know. And I thought, you know what, in the past I've heard God give her words for people, and they've always come to pass. And then a whole year passed on. And again, I wasn't going to go to the conference, but my nephew Michael said to me, he said, Auntie, Mum and Dad aren't going this year, but if you go, I'll be able to go with you. You know, within a space of a few days, everything just fell in place. We got accommodation, we got a lift down to Minehead again, and everything just fell into place. And there I was again, sitting in a big, huge tent meeting, saying to the Lord, Lord, I need you to speak to me. You know, and it was a year on. You know, sometimes God has to drop things into our hearts to prepare the way for us. And it took a year for God to deal with me, to bring me to that place, because I kept thinking, if I go to Bible college, Mum and Dad would kill me, literally. I thought if I'd have said to, you know, my parents, I'm going to university, it would have been, oh, that's good, you know, she's studying, she's doing well. But Bible college, bearing in mind, they weren't Christians at this time. So anyway, I'm sitting in this big tent meeting again, and the minister that stands up begins to share about how God called him to Bible college, and I thought, I don't believe this. Everywhere I'm going, this is all I'm hearing about Bible college. And then eventually, after he'd preached, he was preaching from Matthew's Gospel. And you know, God knows how to speak into our hearts. And he knew the thing that would hold me back from doing what he wanted me to. And he began to preach where in the Gospel of Matthew, where it says, are you willing to forsake your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, for the sake of the gospel? And I remember sitting in that meeting and I said, Lord, I want to follow you, but I know if I do this, there's going to be problems with my parents. But I'm going to go out for prayer. And I'm going to ask somebody, one of the ministers, to pray for me. So at the end of the meeting, I went out, and there was probably thousands of people in that meeting. It was a big, massive, huge tent. I went out to the front, and this man came and stood in front of me, and he said, "What do you want prayer